wildlife management area. This place is rich in history. About a little over 100 years ago, there was a family feud that took place out here between the Mizells and the Barbers. And inserted within today's video is an interview that we did with Johnny Barber, part of the Barber family, and riding with us is half-sister, part of the Summerlin family. So that's going to be the interview. Johnny was not able to ride out here with us today, but we're going to put his interview in here as we're going along. If it's hunting season, like small game season in January, and you come out, bring a bag of candy or something for the people that are working out here. They're a good 10 miles from the closest store.
And they like chocolate.
They do like chocolate and Snickers. Today I just grabbed a bag of Jolly Ranchers and I left it on the bench because I don't even see anybody working the gate. Let's go. I have with us Johnny Barber from the Barber family, and he's got a book. You'll see a link below, and this was written by Mary Ida Bass Barber, which is
my cousin, my second cousin.
His second cousin. So Johnny's going to tell us a little bit about the Barber family.
They had a bunch of cattle going from Charlotte Harbor to Okeechobee for the Marshall Plan, and we were giving cocoa to each one of these cowboys, and this was in 1948. Well, I had heard rumors about the feud up till then, you know, and because my grandma Yates said you had a great grandpa that had Mose Barber that had a big herd of cows, but he actually killed a sheriff. You know, he killed the sheriff of Orange, Seminole, and Osceola County, March 20th, 1870. Well, these cowboys were riding right by our porch, and I was putting cocoa in their cups, and I was getting a nickel a cup. I had a whole jar full of nickels. So that 4 days later, it was April the 3rd, 1948. We got the newspaper from Fort Myers, and it said, "Cattle feud continues. 8 cowboys dead." And Mama said, "Dadgummit, they still got the feud going on after 88 years. How can they keep a feud going for 88 years? That all started in 1870. And that was the last killing of the feud. 134 people were dead at that time. 4 more that was killed in the Lincoln Cattle War. The Lincoln Cattle War only lasted 6 years, but the Barber-Mizell Feud lasted 88 years. And my great-grandpa was William Barber, and he was killed when Chief Easter put a red stick out against the Barbers for grabbing Seminole cattle. They killed Will Barber. He had 2 arrows in his side, and he ran in the log cabin and told her, "Susan, grab the kids and run to the gator cave. Hide in the gator cave till the Seminoles are gone. They're gonna get me. I done fired both of my muskets. I ain't got no more ammo." And she crawled out the back window and grabbed everybody, including she grabbed Champ and all the rest of the kids, and went in the gator cave. So when Mose Barber came back, he adopted Susan and her whole family. So he had 13 kids to raise. Each kid could get 160 acres on a Pioneer grant. They had 4,000 or 5,000 acres. Because if you had male children to herd cattle, you could get 160 acres on a Pioneer grant
for each kid.
For each kid. So that's how he wound up with more range than anybody else, you know. But him and the Mizells did not get along. The Mizells were a high-class family. They got hooked up with the Reconstruction government.
Yeah.
After the Civil War, they got hooked up with the Reconstruction government.
It's John and David.
Right. John Mizell was the judge for the territory, and David Mizell, they gave him because Stewart, the other sheriff, he he wouldn't hang anybody. So the Reconstruction government in Orlando said, okay, we're going to put Barber-Mizell, as long as we pay him his money, he'll hang people. So they appointed him to be the sheriff. And that means the sheriff of Orange, Seminole, and Osceola County. He had about a 400-mile strip that he had control of, you know. They had a cow named Tater Lean. And Tater Lean was one of the causes of the feud. Andrew Jackson Barber, my great-granduncle, had a cow that liked sweet potatoes. And he kept getting in Barber-Mizell's potato patch. And Barber-Mizell owned a big plantation in the middle of Orlando, which is on Nebraska Street. The plantation home is still there. You can go see it now. It's Lou Gardens. Barber-Mizell is buried behind that. But anyway, they got that cow mixed up because
that's a prize cow, right?
It got branded by the Barber brand, but then when it got in Mizell's sweet potato patch, he branded it with the MZ. He put the Mizell brand on it. So during the feud, they took the cowhide because so many people had been killed. They laid it on the courthouse in front of the Orange County Courthouse, and it had both brands on it. Mose Barber had about 9,000 head of cows, so they wanted them cows. So when I first come back from Vietnam, my aunt told me there was a feud. I hadn't heard too much detail on the feud, and she said, well, go to the Orange County Courthouse and go to the Orange County Library and look up the Barber family. So I pulled open the drawer, and it had 2 death warrants, a death warrant for Mose Barber and a death warrant for Needham Yates. And I said, well, then I found out I'm related to both people, you know. So, and then right behind it was a page, The Story of the Feud by Clyde Story. Lizzie Yates, who was called Babe because she was one of 13 children, was the first cousin to Melintha Lee. Melintha Lee Yates was married to Needham Yates, who was the foreman of the Barber Ranch, and shot Barber-Mizell at Bull Creek. And then I started reading on, and it was talking about Mose Barber. It says Mose Barber is the one that ordered the killing because they kept grabbing tax cows for him. They arrested Andrew Jackson Barber for cattle rustling because he grabbed Tater Lean off the Mizell sweet potato patch.
Taking his own cow back.
He took his own cow back, and they arrested him. They were taking him to Jacksonville, and at the steamboat landing, he wanted a chaw of tobacco. He was only 14, but he already chewed tobacco. And Mose Barber handed that tobacco to Barber-Mizell, who was holding. The kid was handcuffed to Barber-Mizell. He reached with his other hand and got the tobacco, put the tobacco in his mouth, but he had a knife. And when he cut the chaw, he cut the kid's lip. He cut the kid's lip, and Mose Barber says, Barber-Mizell, I'll see you dead. My name ain't Mose Barber if I don't see you dead for cutting that boy's mouth open. And that boy's innocent. You're putting him in jail in Jacksonville for stealing his own cow. The arguments between the Mizells and the Barbers kept on going. And I'm not going to go into all the detail, but they had about 9 warrants out for Mose Barber. And then he kept avoiding going to the courthouse. He'd say, I'm going, but he never went. From where he lived, it took about 5 to 10 days to go to the courthouse. So every time he'd go to the courthouse, George Bass and a bunch of the other cowboys from Orlando that was working with the Reconstruction government, they would ride out and round up all the unbranded Barber cows that they could get and head them for Orlando cow pens. So they were stealing Mose Barber blind every time they put a warrant on him, you know. So he finally said, I ain't paying no more taxes. Now what happened is he had made a lot of money in gold. During the Civil War, Mose Barber smuggled cows to Cuba, and the Cuban government paid him in gold doubloons, you know. So that's one reason the Reconstruction guys was after him, because they wanted that gold. He had 8 bags of Spanish doubloons, you know. So the first time he paid taxes, he paid it in gold, laid it right on the table. And that just blew their eyeballs up like a football, you know. Mose Barber, he wired Barber-Mizell, netted him and said, don't come out here for no more cows. You know, so he comes out, Barber-Mizell, he said, I ain't gonna go for that. I got some papers to serve on this man. We're charging Mose Barber with attempted murder. We're charging little Mose Barber with attempted murder for making out like that we're gonna hang George Bass. You know, so he had that warrant and 2 others to ride out to the Barber Ranch and serve. You know, Barber-Mizell should have left the Barbers alone, is what he should have done, but he didn't do it. So he rides out there, and he stopped at Needham Yates' house and talked to Melintha Lee, you know, my grandma's cousin, and he said, I got these warrants to serve and all that, and he says, what you got in your corral? And she said, I got 50 head of Barber cows in the corral. He said, well, me and my sons are just going to round those up and run them right on into Orlando for taxes. And she said, you know what Mo said about that? He said, I don't care. So he rounds up them cows, and they start them down through the bog. And there was the bog was too deep to get by on both sides, but they had that Bull Creek crossing where it had white sand, like a ridge of white sand. So they run them cows up on that white sand. In the meantime, Needham Yates and Will Yates and the little boy that was 14, Jack Yates, they're looking at him from the distance, with a pair of binoculars. And oh, now we know where to go. We'll go to that deer stand over there at Bull Creek, and that's where we'll catch him, right there. So they clumb up in them 2 cypress trees and got on that platform with a 50 caliber buffalo gun, and they popped David Mizell out of the saddle, and he flopped over, and he wasn't dead. He told his boys, he said, don't let this mean anything, just because I'm dying, because I know I got a bullet through here and coming out my side, and I ain't gonna live. So, but don't let it create a war. Boy, he didn't know what he was saying. John Randolph said, well, I'll tell you what I want you guys to do. I want you to get the crowd from Orlando, from the Reconstruction government, and ride out there on the Barber Range, and I don't want no prisoners. No prisoners. You get them, you kill them, you tell everybody they were trying to escape, just make sure you shoot them in the back. Don't shoot them from the front, because then they wasn't trying to escape if you shoot them from the front. So they rode out there and they captured Needham Yates and Will Yates, the old man, and Jake, the boy, and they stood them up on cypress stumps, and they told Needham Yates, okay, now you need to tell us about the Barbers and who set this whole deal up about killing Sheriff David Mizell, because we want revenge for that. That ain't right. And if you don't say what happened, we're going to shoot you. So William Mitchell just stood there, didn't say nothing. Pew! They shot him. He fell over. Then they went to the old man. The old man that was 90 years old said, now, Mr. Yates, you're an old man. You don't want to die. You want to live your age. You might live to be 100. Just go ahead and tell us about the Barbers and the Pagets and the Summerlins and all that was involved in this thing, and you won't get killed. We'll let you go. And the old man said, you're a bunch of baloney. I know better than that. I know what's going to happen.
That's a good
I know what's going to happen. Boom!
Family-friendly show.
Yeah, and they shot him. And Melintha Lee brought the jackets, the Levi jackets, to the courthouse and laid them out. And she said, you see here, they done shot the buttons off the front of their jackets and everything. They weren't trying to escape. They cold-blooded murdered them without a trial. This was a lynching, a bullet lynching. This is what this was, a bullet lynching.
She brought the jackets
right
to the courthouse with all the bullet holes in them.
Right in the front, not in the back. We went right through the front and tore the bullet, those little metal buttons, blew them right off the front of their jackets. They killed them in cold-blooded murder, John Randolph Mizell, he says, we'll tell you what we'll do. Just lay low. We're going to lay low for about 10 days and let them Barbers kind of settle down. And we're going to make out like the Yateses didn't say nothing about them. And then when we go to get them, we'll come in from all sides and we'll grab them, And so they waited about 14 days. And they delayed, they were going to have an arraignment about the 3 Yateses, and they delayed that. They put that off till August, And so in April, they rode out to the Barber Range. Mose Barber had deeded all his cows to his son that was a preacher. His name was Isaac Barber. Isaac Barber. They deeded the cows to Isaac because he was a Baptist preacher. They figured, well, nobody, the Reconstruction guys ain't going to mess with him because the whole community loves him. They ain't going to mess with him. Shoot, man, they rode out there. It took about 100 people out there. And so what had happened is Isaac had went out and took his 2 sons, and they were planting sweet potato slips. And they surround Isaac. And his 2 little boys says, what's going on? And Stewart says, you better get these young'uns on their ponies and get them out of here, because you ain't leaving. And they took 2 lariats and tied them around an oak tree and tied him up to an oak tree. And Isaac says, what's this all about? Is this about Sheriff David? And they said, yeah, we got word from the Yateses that you fellas is the ones that engineered this thing about Sheriff Dave Mizell being killed and shot at Bull Creek. And Isaac said, I didn't have nothing to do with it. I had nothing to do with it. He said, yeah, well, Mose Barber deeded all his cows over to you. And so that puts you right in the center of the target. And they shot him 103 times. And then they got after the other barbers. Mose Barber got away. When the mob that's chasing Mose Barber bogged up in the creek, Mose Barber and Champ Barber and Arch and all them, and Needham Yates and Lyle Paget, they got away when they were chasing them, you know, and in the bog that's over by the edge of the airport, you know, where all that muck's at, that's where they bogged up at. But they had Chippewa ponies, they had Indian ponies, but little Mose Barber had a Moravian stallion, a brand new pony that didn't know the swamp. He bogged up. They got little Mose. This is after they shot the sheriff, you know. They got little Mose. They tied a blacksmith ankle around his neck and they drowned him in Lake Conway. Champion and Marion and a bunch of the other barbers had took the main herd, part of the main herd. They were trying to drive it to Jacksonville, and the mob caught up with them. The mob caught up with them and killed them all. And they put them in a gator hole, and they ate all the bodies. The last they heard of Mose Barber is, there's two stories on it. One story is that he went to Texas. They never got him. And they never found the 8 bags of gold he made smuggling cows to Cuba.
That's a story from a descendant of Mose Barber, not Moses.
Mose Barber and Needham Yates.
And if you'd like more information on that, there's a book that's written by
my cousin.
His cousin,
Marietta Bass Barber.
And you can get it on Amazon. There's a link below. All right. Well, thank you for coming out, and thank you for sharing the story. It is great to go out on Jeep rides, and I love history. And Johnny loves history.
Yes, sir. I sure do.
To hear history from people who were
actually involved
is a lot cooler than just reading it in the story. Thank you so much for coming out and joining us.
Okay, no problem.
We'll see you on the next trail ride. I'm Matt,
John Clayton Barber. Thank you very much.
And we'll see you next time. You've probably heard me say it plenty of times. Prescribed burns are beneficial for the environment. Lightning strikes naturally caused regular fires. In the wildlife management areas, they manage the areas that they're going to do prescribed burn with, and as you can see on one side we got nice fresh grass, and the other side it's burned. It does clear out the unwanted vegetation. We have a lot of invasive plant life here in Florida that doesn't belong here, and it will clear it out. The cord grass, like the stuff that you see out at Jeepin with Judd, unfortunately has oil inside of it, and when that catches on fire, it heats up the level in temperature. It can actually kill off a lot of the pine trees. Snake warning. I see a snake. I'm gonna stop, see if I can catch it. Right down there is a black racer, and the problem with wearing shorts is that it's going to be hard to catch, because if I step on it to stop it from going away, it's going to come up and bite me in the leg. But let's give it a shot.
Watch for ticks. Oh, you got it.
Ow.
And it got him.
Oh, and it's pooping all over me.
Oh, you're not mad. You are
Yeah,
mad.
he's mad because I'm got him behind the head. Look, this is a black racer. All right. Black racers are a very common species in Florida, and they can be aggressive, and they do bite. Stop it! You ready?
Yeah.
Got him? All right, that was totally uncalled for. Now, just in case you didn't know, I have studied herpetology most of my life, and so identifying snakes has been pretty much part of my life since I was a kid. Black racers are generally hard to catch because they move pretty fast. They can be aggressive, case in point, but they're always a challenge to catch. Nice to see a snake for a change.
Different angle of the shadows. You better get that in a hurry.
This little side road down here goes to Billy Lake. It is a one-way road. It'll go down to the end. If you got a kayak and you like fishing, that's a place that you can do a little fishing out here. Billy Lake. Bull Creek is not a place that you go to test out the capabilities of your vehicle. Other than small game season, when you can get to some of these small game trails, particularly trail number 3, that's a totally different story. But the rest of the year, this is a well-maintained road, two-wheel drive friendly. You could even take a car out here. That's how smooth it is and how maintained it is. It's got some potholes and some bumps.
Very dry in there. Very dry.
In the southeast corner is a small game season trail. It's small game season trail number 3. Other than small game season, which is in January and most of February, this road is closed to vehicles. Now, one of the most spectacular trails in this area is right down that road. You'll get a quarter mile or so or more of water crossing across Bull Creek. Now over here on this eastern side, there's a small area with a walking trail that goes right on back here. There's a parking area. And if you walk down this trail far enough, you got to get through the open field. You will come to an area that is the remnants of the old rail system. They did a lot of logging back here during the day and turpentine, and they used to make some narrow gauge rails to move the logs out. They would take them down over to Melbourne area, over to St. John's. And so there was a railroad that ran through that area way back there. You're gonna have to walk down this trail. So you can see that little trail going through there. It's closed to vehicles. And then when you get to an area where you can actually see where the mound was, there's no more tracks or anything back there, but you can see the mound in the area where they built up the dirt. Old railroad, a little bit of Florida history.
There you go.
down that road, you have Cemetery Road. There's actually a cemetery over there where you have some of the families that Matthew's talked about and John's talked about in the video.
Yep.
This is Kevin. Kevin's with us, and Kevin is an avid fisherman, and he has fished often out here at Crabgrass Creek, which is on the entrance. What do you catch out here?
Catfish, bluegill. Once in a while you catch a speck out of here, and mudfish.
And how often do you catch a fish?
Pretty often when we push it underneath the bridge.
Especially underneath the bridge?
The bridge is deeper.
And what are you fishing with?
Minnows, worms, and crickets.
Well, there's a little insider information for you. Bring your fishing pole and spend a little time fishing. Who knows? You might catch something to eat. Give a man a fish and you fed him for the day. Teach a man to fish and you fed him for life. A little bit of fishing with Kevin. Kevin, by the way, is the one that's been working on the AC with me on the green Jeep. Driving home from work the other day, it was 104 in that Jeep. Well, this has been Herky Huffman, Bull Creek Road, and a whole lot of history with Johnny Barber from the Barber family and the Summerlin family being represented here as well. Couple things really quick housekeeping wise. The small game trails season is only during January and February, so you can't come out here and ride that. Stay on named and numbered roads, stock friendly ride, and right now there's a lot of prescribed burning going on, so what you see is a lot of the prescribed burn. I'm Matt.
I'm Randy. I'm Marika.
I'm Kevin.
And this has been a Florida Jeep Ride. Hey, we'll see you on the next trail.